I used to think Christmas Eve was supposed to smell like cinnamon, not smoke. But that night, it smelled like burning plastic and champagne. My father's new wife, Veronica, stood beside the fire with a half-empty glass, her red dress catching the flicker of light from the tree. I'd spent 3 days picking out his gift, a framed photograph of him and my mother from 1999 before cancer hollowed her out, before everything soft in our family hardened. I wrapped it carefully silver paper white ribbon neat corners. I wanted it to be peace, or maybe memory. Instead, it became a weapon. "For you," I said, handing the small box across the table. Veronica's nails brushed my fingers as she took it. Cold, polished, practiced. She peeled the wrapping slowly, deliberately, the way someone dismantles a trap. The moment she saw the picture, she smiled, not in surprise, but in victory. "Oh," she said lightly, her voice sliding like honey over glass. "Her again." She turned to my father. "You keep letting her bring ghosts into our house." Dad shifted in his seat, eyes on his plate. He didn't defend me. He didn't say anything. Veronica lifted the frame by the edge, studied my mother's face for a moment, and then, in one smooth motion, dropped it into the trash can beside the dining table. The sound of shattering glass sliced through the room. "You don't belong here anymore," she said quietly. It wasn't a shout. It was worse. Calm. Surgical. My heart didn't just break, it froze. For a second, nobody moved. The only sound was the faint hiss of the fireplace. Then my father coughed. My half-sister smirked. And someone, maybe Veronica, maybe all of them, laughed. That sound echoed bright and cruel until it filled every corner of me. I wanted to reach into the trash, pull my mother's face from the shards, scream that I was still part of this family. But I didn't. I sat perfectly still. My hand tightened around the edge of my chair until my knuckles turned white. I could feel every heartbeat in my throat. "Don't make a scene," my father murmured, eyes still lowered. That was the moment I knew there was no family left to save. I stood. The chair legs scraped against the wood floor like a scream no one would admit hearing. My coat was on the rack by the door. I slipped it on button by button, careful not to tremble. "Claire," my father said softly, almost like an apology. He was too afraid to finish. Veronica's lips curved. "Run away again," she said, voice sweet with venom. "Just like your mother." Outside, the cold bit through my gloves. Snowflakes clung to my hair as I crossed the driveway, barefoot. I'd left my shoes near the tree. My reflection in the car window didn't look like me anymore. It looked like a woman watching the last thread of her bloodline burn. Inside the house, laughter rose again, muffled through the walls, but I heard it. I always would. I started the car, the headlights cutting through the white. I didn't cry. Not one tear. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered to the empty road ahead. "You shouldn't have done that." My voice didn't shake. It sounded like a promise, the kind that doesn't need to be repeated. I was 19 when my mother died, and I thought losing her was the worst thing that would ever happen to me. I was wrong. The real loss came 8 months later, wearing perfume that smelled like lilies and power. Her name was Veronica Hale, back then, my father's former student, 20 years younger, newly divorced, and very good at pretending to care. She arrived at the funeral with a casserole dish and left with my father's attention. By the time spring came, she'd moved in. I came home from college that summer to find my mother's things in cardboard boxes stacked by the garage. Her piano was gone. The garden she used to tend every morning had been flattened into gravel. When I asked where everything was, Veronica said lightly, "Your father and I are simplifying. You should try it." At first, she was polite in that brittle way women like her mastered. She called me sweetheart in public and the guest in private. She introduced herself to neighbors as the new Mrs. Anderson with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. My father followed her around like a man half drunk on the idea of being young again. He stopped wearing his wedding ring, replaced it with a smartwatch she'd bought him, started jogging, changed his diet, his laugh, even his opinions. When I mentioned Mom, he would sigh and say, "Let's not dwell on the past." The house itself began to change too. the framed photos of my mother disappeared one by one, replaced by Veronica's coastal paintings and her face in triplicate. The living room, once soft and cluttered with history, smelled like new leather and expensive candles. It looked like a hotel room rented by someone pretending to live there. One night, I found a box in the attic labeled miscellaneous. Inside were my mother's jewelry, her letters, and the pressed flowers she'd kept from her wedding bouquet. Veronica caught me holding it. She leaned against the doorframe and smiled. "If you're planning to take souvenirs, be sure to ask first." I left that night and moved into a cheap apartment with thin walls and a leaking faucet. My father didn't call for 2 weeks. When he did, it was to tell me that Veronica was handling the bills now that she was better at managing money. I didn't argue. I just kept sending him $400 each month because I knew his pension barely covered the mortgage. Every transfer felt like a bruise I was choosing to keep. Over time, the distance between us became policy. My father stopped referring to me as my daughter and started saying Claire's independent. Veronica corrected him once at a barbecue, laughing, "You mean rebellious." The people around us laughed with her. I learned that in her vocabulary, independence meant disobedience, and disobedience was a disease she intended to cure. Whenever I visited, she had a new rule. No shoes in the living room, no pictures on the walls, no talking about that woman, my mother. When I asked why my mom's name couldn't even be spoken, Veronica said, "Because she's gone and I'm here." She said it with the certainty of someone who believed erasing the dead made her immortal. By the 3rd year, she'd completely rewritten my family. My father's memories bent around her like metal under heat. He forgot birthdays, skipped calls, started repeating Veronica's phrases like scripture. "You're too emotional. You remember wrong. She's just trying to help." That last one always gutted me because he truly believed it. On my 25th birthday, I mailed him a framed picture of the 3 of us from before it all changed. It was returned unopened. The note attached said, "Please respect Veronica's boundaries." I hung the picture in my apartment, cracked frame and all. Some nights I would stare at it and try to remember what our laughter used to sound like before it became a weapon. And even then, part of me kept hoping he would wake up and see what she was doing. I didn't realize that people like Veronica didn't just take over houses, they took over histories. They rewrote them word by word until you started doubting your own memory. I didn't know it yet, but she wasn't finished rewriting mine. The next Christmas dinner felt like walking into a museum built on the ashes of my childhood. Everything looked polished, curated, cold. The piano was gone, replaced by a minimalist bookshelf lined with Veronica's design magazines. Even the scent of the house had changed vanilla and disinfectant. My father opened the door with a hesitant smile, the kind that asked for forgiveness before a word was spoken. "You made it," he said, as though I'd been invited somewhere I didn't belong. I handed him a bottle of wine and tried to smile back. Veronica appeared behind him, draped in silver satin, her hair in perfect waves. "Claire," she said, like she was trying on my name for size. "I wasn't sure you'd show. We're keeping it small this year, just family." I glanced past her and saw their new family, my father, Veronica, her daughter Lily, and a man I didn't recognize, Veronica's cousin apparently. My name card sat at the very end of the table next to the trash bin near the wall. The smell of roasted ham filled the room, but it couldn't hide the sharpness of something else control. Every chair had a place, every conversation had a script, and I was the misplaced line. "You still doing your interior thing?" Veronica asked as we sat down. Her voice was all sugar and surveillance. "Design," I corrected softly. "Oh, right, decorating. It's cute that you stuck with it." She laughed and passed the bread to Lily, who giggled on cue. My father poured wine into her glass before his own. I noticed she never poured mine. Every time I tried to speak, she cut me off. Every story became hers, every silence became my fault. It was as if the table itself belonged to her. Her rules, her rhythm, her invisible leash around everyone's throat. I caught my father's gaze once. He looked tired, hollowed out, a man edited down to obedience. I wanted to tell him that I remembered when he used to defend me, but even that memory felt like trespassing. The tension in my chest built until I could barely swallow. I excused myself to the kitchen just to breathe. The trash can beside the counter was half open, the lid tilted. Inside, buried beneath paper towels, I saw it, my mother's photo frame still cracked. Still, they're never thrown out. The sight of it jolted something in me. Veronica's voice floated in from the dining room. Claire never could handle responsibility, always running from real life. My father said nothing. I walked back to the table, each step a slow decision. You know, I said setting my glass down, Mom used to say Christmas wasn't about gifts. It was about remembering who you love enough to sit beside. Veronica smiled, lips tight. Well, she said sweetly, some of us are better at moving on. She reached for the carving knife and sliced into the ham with surgical precision. You could learn from that. For a moment, I wanted to scream to tell her that erasing people wasn't moving on it, was murder in slow motion. But I didn't. I watched the knife gleam under the chandelier and realized something terrifying. She didn't just want my place at the table. She wanted the version of me that still believed this was fixable. When the meal ended, I helped clear the plates. Veronica pretended not to see me collecting scraps, scraping them into the bin where my mother's face lay hidden under foil and bones. She leaned close and whispered, "You should stop coming here. It confuses him." Her perfume was cloying, expensive, and suffocating. "Maybe it confuses you," I said, voice steady. Her eyes flickered just for a second. Then she smiled wider. "Don't make a scene." I carried my coat to the foyer, heart hammering but face calm. My father followed, hovering behind me like a ghost chained to someone else's will. "She means well," he murmured. "She's trying." I turned to him, searching for even a trace of the man who once taught me that silence was the coward's language. All I found was fear. "Then you can both keep trying without me," I said quietly. I opened the door. The December air hit like a slap. Behind me, Veronica called out, "Run away again, Claire." I didn't answer. I walked down the steps barefoot again, the cold biting through my skin, and for the first time I realized I wasn't running away. I was leaving. I drove home through sleet headlights cutting through a gray blur of sky that wouldn't end. I didn't feel cold anymore, just hollow. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking from something that wasn't weather. I turned on the kettle out of habit, the sound filling the silence like a heartbeat I could control. Steam rose, fogging the window, and for the first time in years, I realized how quiet my home was. No footsteps pacing behind me, no corrections, no polite cruelty wrapped in compliments. Just silence. I sat at the small kitchen table, the same one I'd bought from a thrift store when I first moved out, and opened my laptop. My cursor blinked like a dare. My father had never changed the shared bank account details. He'd left my name on it when I started helping him manage bills after Mom died. It was meant to pay property tax and repairs things my dad never quite handled. I logged in expecting to see maybe a few automatic payments, maybe nothing. What I found made my stomach drop. Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn over the past 18 months, all tagged under miscellaneous transfers. I clicked each line one after another until the screen filled with a pattern: money moved from our family account to an account under V. Hale Anderson, Veronica's maiden name. Over $1,200 every single month, transferred like clockwork. My jaw locked. That money wasn't mine. It wasn't his. It was what remained of my mother's education fund money she'd saved from tutoring and art commissions so I could finish school debt-free. I thought we'd spent it years ago. Apparently, Veronica had been quietly draining it since she married him. The numbers blurred my pulse, hammering in my ears. It wasn't the theft that hurt most. It was how cleanly she'd done it, like a surgeon removing the last piece of my mother she couldn't burn. I printed every statement one by one, the pages sliding into a neat pile beside my mug. The printer's hum was the only sound in the room. Each sheet was a confession they hadn't realized they'd written. I thought of my father, how he'd say I was overreacting, how Veronica would twist it into helping the household. I could already hear her laugh, the same one from dinner, the one that said, "You'll never win because I own the story." My phone buzzed. A message from Naomi. "You still awake?" I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Yeah." She called immediately. Her voice was steady, sharp, the kind of calm you get from watching too many people finally break. "Claire," she said, "you don't have to keep playing nice. Paper trails don't lie." "It's my dad," I said. "He'll think I'm trying to hurt her." "You're not. You're just showing what's already true." The line went quiet for a beat. Then Naomi asked softly, "You ready to stop letting them use you?" I looked at the printouts, the ink still warm. For the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like armor. "Tomorrow," I said. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my table until the sky paled from black to blue, sipping cold tea and watching the stack of papers grow heavier in meaning. When the sun rose, I slid them into a manila envelope, sealed it, and wrote one word across the front, proof. The sound of tape ripping was louder than any scream I could have given them. That morning I realized silence isn't surrender. It's the pause before strategy. Morning light came through the blinds in pale gray lines. I hadn't slept, but I felt more awake than I had in months. The envelope labeled proof sat beside my keys on the counter like a silent promise. I showered, dressed simply, pulled my hair back, and drove to the bank as the first snow started to fall. The bank smelled like printer ink and burnt coffee. A Christmas wreath still hung above the entrance, shedding plastic needles on the floor. The teller recognized me from years of payments for my father's mortgage. "Same account today?" she asked. "Not anymore," I said. I signed the forms to remove my name from the joint ownership, canceling all automatic transfers to his household. The branch manager asked carefully, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Ms. Anderson, it's been in your name for over 10 years. I met her eyes. "I'm sure." My signature looked cleaner than I expected. Each stroke of the pen felt like cutting through another layer of guilt. I sat in the car outside, heat blasting, and called my father. He answered with the kind of weary affection that once could have broken me. "Claire." "It's early. Everything all right?" I pulled my name from the accounts. I said quietly, "You'll need to manage the bills directly through Veronica." There was a pause, the sound of him breathing. "Why would you do that?" "Because she's been moving money from Mom's education fund into her personal account. Over $1,000 every month." Another pause. Then the voice I dreaded. "Veronica's been handling things responsibly. You must be misunderstanding. I have the records, Dad. You can look when you're ready." His tone hardened. "She's doing what's best for us." "You're being dramatic." That word again. Always that word. It was what people like Veronica said when they couldn't argue with evidence. "Then you can both live without my help," I said. The line went silent for 3 full seconds before I hung up. An hour later, an email arrived. The subject line read, "Ungrateful child." The message was only 1 sentence long. "You'll regret this." I forwarded it to Naomi with a short note, "Documented." Then I kept going. I called the property tax office, the insurance company, the electric provider. One by one, I detached myself from their world. Some representatives hesitated, asking if I was sure. Others processed the requests without comment. Every confirmation email that landed in my inbox felt like an exhale I hadn't taken in years. By evening, snow covered the city in a quiet white hush. I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. The first ping of the family group chat came just after 9. Add, "Claire, you need to apologize to your stepmother. She's devastated." "Veronica, you've embarrassed this family." "Lily." She sent a short message that read, "Clap, clap, clap," as if my pain were a show worth cheering. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed one line. "Claire, all transactions have been reported to the bank. Have a peaceful Christmas." I hit send and muted the conversation. 10 minutes later, the calls started, one after another. First my father, then Veronica, then unknown numbers. The phone buzzed against the counter until the vibration sounded like static. I didn't answer any of them. At 11:42 p.m., the calls stopped. The silence that followed was heavy but clean. I turned off all the lights except for the lamp over the stove and sat there watching the snow fall through the kitchen window. For the first time, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt earned. Naomi texted at midnight. "Proud of you. Tomorrow we file everything officially." I looked at the message until my eyes blurred, then placed the phone face down. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, steadier, older, sharper. I thought of the years I'd spent begging for peace from people who profited off my guilt. I realized then that peace was never given. It was claimed. Tomorrow would be the beginning. Tonight, I let the silence stand as my answer. The next morning, the messages multiplied like aftershocks. By 7 a.m., my phone was flashing non-stop. I turned it face down, but the vibration rattled across the counter until it fell to the floor. When I picked it up, there were 42 unread texts and 8 voicemails. The last one came from my father's number. His voice was low, cautious, already defeated. "Claire, this isn't how families handle problems. Veronica is upset. She says you've misunderstood. Call me back, sweetheart. We can fix this." The words felt rehearsed, coached. It was Veronica talking through him. At 9, Naomi arrived with 2 coffees and her laptop. She was still in her blazer from court. "They're reacting exactly as expected," she said, opening her files. "Guilt always hides behind noise." She spent the next hour drafting an affidavit for the financial transfers, making sure every timestamp matched the statements I'd printed. The sound of her typing was the calmest thing in the room. By noon, the emails shifted from anger to pleading. "Please don't ruin your father's life." One read. "You're making things worse for yourself," another said. A third from Lily was shorter. "You'll be sorry when he cuts you off completely." I deleted that one without opening the attachment. Then at 2:14 p.m., Veronica broke her silence. Her email subject line was "Cease and desist." It began with the words, "My attorney will be contacting you for defamation." She attached a badly written PDF with no legal letterhead, just bullet points claiming I had fabricated financial records. Naomi scanned it, snorted once, and said, "She Googled this. Probably at 3 in the morning." Then her expression hardened. "But the threat itself helps us, shows intent to intimidate. Keep it." At 5, I received another call from my father. This time I let it go to voicemail. He sounded exhausted. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "She's been good for me. She helped me after your mother died. She took care of this house. Can't you just let it go?" I wanted to scream into the phone. "She didn't take care of the house, Dad. She took it from you." But all I did was press delete. When the sun went down, Naomi packed up her things. "Next step is simple," she said. "We file the report and we don't engage. You're not at war, you're at a verdict." Before she left, she put a hand on my shoulder. "Remember, silence drives them mad because it removes the audience." That night, I didn't open the group chat. I didn't check the emails or the missed calls. I made dinner, lit a candle, turned on the radio, and forced myself to do something ordinary, eat without waiting for an explosion. Outside, snow turned to freezing rain. Inside, my phone stayed dark. But peace never lasts long with people like Veronica. At exactly 11:08 p.m., a thud echoed at my front door, something hitting hard, then silence. I froze. Another hit. When I looked through the peephole, a small package sat on the doormat. No label, no return address, just my name written in sharp slanted handwriting I recognized immediately. Veronica's. Naomi had told me not to engage. I didn't pick it up. I waited until morning until the building supervisor could check. When he came, he opened the box carefully while I stood back. Inside was a single envelope and a broken photo frame, the same one she'd thrown in the trash that night. The picture of my mother was gone. In its place was a note. "You wanted proof. Here's what's left of her." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I said the only words that made sense. "Now it's evidence." The supervisor looked at me confused. "You okay, Ms. Anderson?" I nodded slowly. "Not yet, but she won't be either." 2 days later, the snow outside turned to slush gray, heavy, impatient. The quiet between my walls had begun to feel like peace. But peace never lasts when someone like Veronica feels cornered. That morning around 10, I was sorting through documents Naomi had labeled for the financial claim when a hard, deliberate knock rattled my door. 3 short hits, 1 long. I froze. "Claire," my father's voice. I checked the peephole. He was standing there in his heavy coat hat, pulled low, eyes sunken. Behind him, Veronica hovered immaculate as ever in a fur collar, her lips red as warning lights. My hand tightened around the lock. I didn't open it. "Dad," I said through the door. "What do you want?" He hesitated. "We need to talk. Please, sweetheart." Veronica's voice sliced through him. "Enough of this game. You think you can accuse us of theft and hide behind your lawyer?" "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm protecting myself." Her laugh was brittle. From what your imagination, I almost answered, but Naomi's words echoed in my mind. Don't argue. Document. I'm calling the police if you don't leave, I said evenly. That was when she lost control. You're pathetic, she shouted. You think you're some kind of hero you stole from us, from your father. I have every transaction printed, Veronica. The account is in Mom's name. She took a step forward, and before I could react, the door jerked violently. My father tried to hold her back, but she shoved past him, slamming her palm against the frame so hard the wood cracked. Open the door, Claire, she screamed. You don't get to ruin what we built. I flinched at the impact. Dad, get her away from my door. He said nothing. He didn't even move. That silence broke something in me. The next sound was worse. The hollow thud of her purse hitting the door, then again, harder. The knob twisted. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone and started recording. This is harassment, I said loudly, making sure my voice was on camera. You're being recorded. For a second, there was stillness. Then a final blow, something sharp slammed into the wood. I stumbled backward as the door cracked open just an inch. Veronica's face appeared in the gap, eyes wild. You'll regret this, she hissed and swung her purse again. It hit me square in the chest, sending me against the wall. My elbow cracked against tile. I heard my father shout her name, but his voice was small, swallowed by her fury. She stood over me for one terrifying second before the neighbor's door opened. Mrs. Kim from next door gasped, What's going on out here? Veronica froze. I held up my phone, still recording. Keep it rolling, I told Mrs. Kim. Within minutes, the hallway filled with voices. Someone had called 911. 1. By the time Officer Tate arrived, Veronica's fury had curdled into trembling innocence. She smoothed her coat eye's watery voice, quivering. She attacked me, she said, pointing at me. She's unstable. Tate glanced between us, calm, unmoved. Do you have proof of that? I replayed the video from my phone, the sound of her hitting the door and shouting, You'll regret this. Tate watched in silence, jaw tightening. When the clip ended, he turned to her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. My father tried to intervene. Officer, this is all a misunderstanding. Then you'll understand why I'm documenting it, Tate said. He wrote down every detail, took photos of the cracked frame, my bruised chest, Veronica's trembling hands. When it was over, he handed me a card. File a restraining order. Start today. Don't wait. I nodded, still catching my breath. Veronica shot me a look that could have burned through glass, but she didn't speak. My father avoided my eyes entirely. As Tate led them out, the sound of their footsteps faded down the hall. For a long moment, I stood there staring at the splintered wood and thought about how the door had held barely but enough. It struck me then that doors don't exist to keep people out. They exist to remind you who's not welcome anymore. When I finally locked the new bolt, I whispered to the empty apartment. You're done, Veronica. This time it didn't sound like a wish. It sounded like a verdict. Naomi filed the restraining order that same morning. It was almost mechanical signatures, witness statements, timestamps. She walked me through every line, making sure the video of Veronica's attack was properly logged as Exhibit A. Judges like order, she said, not emotion. Let the paper speak for you. The hearing was scheduled a week later. I arrived early wearing the same gray coat I'd worn to the bank. Naomi stood beside me, composed, focused. Across the aisle, Veronica looked smaller than I remembered, still polished, but thinner, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. My father sat 2 rows behind her, avoiding my gaze. When the judge entered the room, went silent. He was an older man with a slow, deliberate way of speaking that made every word feel like a verdict. Naomi presented the evidence transaction records, the email threats, the video from the hallway. She didn't raise her voice once. When it was Veronica's turn, she cried. She told the court I had provoked her, that I'd made up stories to punish her. The judge watched without reaction, flipping through documents. Mrs. Anderson, he said finally, is this your handwriting? He held up the note from the box, the one that read, You wanted proof. Here's what's left of her. Veronica's tears stopped. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Naomi leaned forward, calm and sharp. Your Honor, that note was delivered to my client's residence less than 24 hours after a police report was filed. The envelope carried Mrs. Anderson's fingerprints. The judge nodded slowly. Enough. He signed the order without further discussion. Veronica was barred from contacting me or approaching within 200 feet. My father started to stand, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Anderson, you may wish to seek independent counsel. There will be an investigation into the misappropriated funds from your late wife's account." The sound of the gavel was final, echoing like the closing of a heavy door. Outside the courthouse, snow was falling again, soft and steady. Naomi handed me a copy of the signed order. "You did it," she said simply. I looked at the paper, the embossed seal catching the gray light. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like oxygen. 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the bank confirming that Veronica's accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Naomi said she might face charges for fraud if the evidence held. The same day, I received a voicemail from my father. His voice was quiet, almost broken. "She's gone, Claire. Packed her things. I don't know where she went. I'm sorry." He didn't say for what. He didn't need to. I didn't call back. Some silences deserve to stay unbroken. In the weeks that followed, the house went up for sale. The listing photos appeared online: empty rooms, polished floors, the same fireplace where my mother's photo had been burned. It looked hollow, like a museum of every lie we'd lived inside. Naomi came over one night with takeout and 2 glasses of wine. We sat on the floor of my apartment, papers spread around us. "You know," she said, "most people never get to see their abusers lose the power they stole." "I didn't want to destroy her," I said. "I just wanted her to stop." Naomi smiled faintly. "That's the thing about people like Veronica. Stopping them looks like destruction because they only understand power in one direction." I thought about that for a long time after she left. About how my father would spend his evenings now in a quiet house filled with echoes. About how silence could sound like freedom or punishment depending on who was listening. When I finally went to bed, I placed the judge's order on my nightstand beside the framed picture of my mother, the one Naomi had helped me restore from a digital backup. The glass was unbroken now. For the first time in over a decade, I slept without dreaming of fire. 3 months later, Veronica reappeared, but not at my door. She resurfaced in an invitation. A friend from the local interior design guild forwarded me an email one morning. "Isn't this your stepmother?" she'd written. The attachment was a digital flyer charity dinner in support of Family Renewal and Trust. The host, Mrs. Veronica Hale Anderson. The venue, the downtown Hilton. At first, I laughed. Then I realized the sponsors listed were legitimate nonprofits I'd once donated to under my mother's name. Veronica was using my mother's legacy to wash her image clean. Naomi read over my shoulder. "You're not going to let her do that, are you?" she asked. "She's been quiet for months," I said. "Maybe this is her new stage." Naomi smiled thinly. "Then we'll give her an audience." She helped me prepare a short video evidence, clean and factual. The financial transfers, the handwriting comparison, the recording of the night she hit the door. No commentary, just proof. "Truth doesn't need narration," Naomi said. "It just needs light." The night of the dinner, I wore black, nothing. Flashy nothing that would draw attention until it was time. The ballroom gleamed with white linens and crystal glasses. Veronica stood at the podium, radiant again, speaking about forgiveness and family unity. My father was there too, seated near the front, his expression carefully blank. She began by thanking donors, then spoke about the importance of second chances. My stomach twisted at her tone, smooth, practiced evangelical. Behind her, a projector flickered to life, showing the charity's logo. When the applause died down, I walked quietly to the tech booth and handed the technician a flash drive. "The updated video," I said softly. He nodded, assuming it was part of the program. Veronica kept talking, unaware. "We must heal," she said, "even when people try to—" The screen behind her changed. The charity logo vanished. In its place appeared the bank statements. Each line item glowed under the ballroom lights. A hush fell over the crowd. Then came the audio, the recording of her voice outside my apartment. "You'll regret this." The impact of the purse hitting the door echoed through the speakers like a drumbeat. Gasps rippled through the room. Veronica turned frozen. "Turn that off," she hissed. "That's not, this is—" But the video kept playing, finishing with the image of the note she'd left me. "You wanted proof. Here's what's left of her." The final slide was a single sentence: "Evidence never lies." Naomi had written that line. Security approached the booth. The host charity director whispered frantically into her phone. A few people stood up, uncertain whether to leave or watch the spectacle unfold. Then, through the confusion, I saw two uniformed officers step into the room, Officer Tate among them. The timing was no coincidence. Naomi had contacted him earlier that week when she confirmed the fraud case was still active. The warrant had been waiting for the right moment. Tate approached the podium calmly. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, voice even, "we need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation." Veronica's face drained of color. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You can't do this here." Tate's tone didn't change. "You can come quietly, or we can continue in front of your guests." The microphones caught every word. The crowd went dead silent. When he placed the cuffs on her wrists, the only sound was the metallic click. My father stood up then finally, but not to defend her. He just stared at me across the room, eyes wide, hands trembling slightly, as if holding the weight of every silence he'd ever chosen. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. As the officers led Veronica out, the projector screen faded to black. Someone started clapping, hesitant at first, then louder. It wasn't applause for me, not really. It was the sound of relief when truth finally fills the room. I left before anyone could ask questions. Outside, snow was falling again, fine and relentless. I stood under a streetlight watching it settle on my coat sleeves and felt something I hadn't felt since I was 19. Not victory, not revenge, just the quiet, undeniable certainty that I had ended something and that it would never touch me again. The news hit faster than I expected. By the next morning, the video from the charity dinner had already gone viral on social media. Someone had filmed the moment Officer Tate led Veronica away in handcuffs. The caption read, "Local charity host arrested for financial fraud mid-speech." Within hours, the story spread to local papers, then state-level news. Every article mentioned the investigation into my late mother's account and how Veronica had siphoned the funds over years. Her face, perfect makeup, frozen in shock under the ballroom lights, became the symbol of hypocrisy. Naomi warned me to stay offline. "Don't read comments," she said. "Justice doesn't need an audience." I tried, but curiosity won. Most people were sympathetic. A few called it family drama, others labeled it poetic justice. One headline simply said, "Stepmother of the Year." I closed my laptop and laughed quietly for the first time in months. It wasn't joy exactly, it was release. 2 days later, my father called. I let it go to voicemail again. His voice was rough, older somehow. "Claire," he said, "I saw everything. I didn't know how bad it was. I believed her. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." He paused, breathing shakily. "She's out on bail. The house is gone. I'm staying with a friend. I just wanted you to know I'm proud of you." I replayed that message 3 times before deleting it. I didn't trust it yet, but for once his words didn't sound borrowed from someone else's mouth. A week later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten, no return address, but the looping script was unmistakable. "Veronica. Claire," it began. "You've destroyed everything. I loved your father. I was trying to protect him from a past that was poisoning him. Your mother's ghost was in every corner of that house. You couldn't let him move on, so I did what I had to. Maybe I went too far, but I don't regret it. You never belonged in that house. You never understood him. I hope you're happy." There was no apology, only justification. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a plastic sleeve, and added it to the evidence file Naomi kept. "It'll help with sentencing," she said later. "People like her don't confess, they rationalize. The court sees that." The trial took months. I didn't attend every hearing, but Naomi kept me informed. Veronica pled guilty to wire fraud and property damage in exchange for reduced sentencing. The judge ordered restitution, every cent taken from my mother's account plus legal fees. When the verdict was read, Naomi texted me one word: "Done." That evening, I sat alone in my apartment and opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. The air smelled faintly of jasmine from the candle burning on my counter. I turned on the radio, but halfway through the first song, I turned it off again. I didn't need noise anymore. Silence had become the proof of peace. A week later, I received another letter, this time from my father. His handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Claire," it read, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see everything clearly now. Veronica made me believe that love was obedience, that silence was respect. You were right to fight back. I don't know if I can make it up to you, but I'd like to try. maybe dinner one day somewhere quiet. Just us. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger when I read his words, only distance and the strange comfort that comes when truth finally draws its boundary lines. I didn't reply right away. I placed his letter beside the court order and the old photo of my mother. 3 pieces of paper, each marking a different version of the same story: loss, survival, and consequence. Outside, snow fell again, slow and clean. I opened the window, let the cold air brush my face, and whispered, "It's over." And for the first time, it really was. Spring came late that year. The city thawed slowly each morning, a little brighter, a little less gray. I'd moved apartments by then, somewhere quieter, farther from the echoes of the past. Naomi helped me sign the lease. Fresh start, she'd said. The building was older, but it had a small courtyard garden, and from my kitchen window I could see a lone maple tree just starting to bloom. For months, I hadn't let myself think about family. I poured my attention into work instead: new clients, clean spaces, designs that felt like breathing. Then one afternoon, a knock came at my door. Soft, hesitant. When I opened it, my father stood there. He looked smaller than I remembered. His coat hung loose, and his eyes, once hard and distant, were tired but clear. "Hi," he said simply. I didn't move. "You shouldn't be here," I said quietly. "I know," he admitted, "but I needed to see you. Just once. I'm in town for a few days. I wanted to return something." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box. It was my mother's jewelry case, the one I'd thought Veronica had sold years ago. She didn't get rid of everything, he said. "I found this after the sale. It's yours." I took the box carefully. The latch still squeaked the same way it used to when I was a kid, sneaking in to look at her necklaces. Inside were 3 things: her wedding ring, a pressed flower, and a folded note. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was mine from years ago, something I'd written as a teenager and left in her drawer after she died. "I'll take care of him." "I promise." I swallowed hard. "You should keep this," I said, trying to hand it back. He shook his head. "No, you already kept your promise. You took care of me longer than I deserved." We stood there in silence, the years between us settling like dust. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "I sold the lake house," he murmured. "Used part of it to pay restitution, part for retirement. The rest—" He hesitated. "I donated to a scholarship fund in your mother's name. For art students. Thought you'd like that." I nodded, blinking fast. "She would have," I said. "She'd like that it's for something beautiful." He smiled weakly. "She would have liked that you're okay." We talked for a few minutes longer. Nothing deep, just the kind of words people say when they're learning how to exist without guilt. When he left, he didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Some things didn't need ceremony. They just needed acknowledgement. After he was gone, I carried the jewelry box to the window and set it beside the maple tree's reflection. The petals outside were falling like tiny white notes on the soil. For a moment, I let myself imagine my mother's voice again, soft but steady. "Don't let them rewrite you." That evening, Naomi came by. I told her about the visit, about the jewelry box and the note. She listened quietly, then said, "Closure doesn't mean everything gets fixed. It just means you stopped bleeding from the same wound." We sat in the courtyard for a while, sipping tea. The air smelled like wet earth and lilacs. When she left, she hugged me once tight and real. Later that night, I placed my mother's ring on the windowsill next to the small plant I'd been nursing back to life since winter. The ring caught the moonlight, faint but steady. I thought of Veronica's downfall, my father's letter, the judge's order, and realized they were all different kinds of endings, but this quiet room and the blooming tree outside felt like the only real beginning. Before bed, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to the Scholarship Foundation. "If you ever need design work for the Students' Gallery, I'd be happy to help pro bono." When I hit send, it felt like setting something free. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window, warm against the jewelry box, the ring, and the fragile little plant that somehow survived the frost. Peace doesn't announce itself, I realized. It just grows quietly in the places you finally stop fighting. Summer arrived quietly, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next disaster. The court case was long over. The news cycle had moved on, and my name no longer trended beside Veronica's. Naomi had closed the final paperwork weeks ago, and my father had moved to a small town near the coast. He'd sent one last letter, short, respectful, asking for nothing. I framed it beside my mother's picture not as forgiveness, but as record proof that change, however small, had begun. My days became simple. I woke early, walked the garden brewed coffee, and opened my laptop to work on quiet projects, restoration designs for old community spaces, a few charity jobs tied to the Art Scholarship Fund. Each task felt like a piece of something my mother had started and I was finally finishing. I even found myself humming while working the same tune she used to hum while painting. Sometimes Naomi visited on weekends, bringing takeout and gossip from the courthouse. She never mentioned Veronica unless I did. They moved her to state facility, she said once, almost casually. Minimum security, 18 months, maybe less with good behavior. I only nodded. Justice wasn't about the length of a sentence. It was about the end of fear. In August, I was invited to attend the opening ceremony for the Evelyn Hale Memorial Art Scholarship exhibit. The name wasn't chosen by me, it was my father's idea. When the foundation contacted me to consult on the gallery layout, I hesitated, then agreed. It was held in a small hall lined with student paintings, rough and brilliant and raw. As I walked through the displays, I felt a strange lightness. For once, the walls didn't echo with ghosts, they carried possibility. Midway through the event, one of the organizers handed me a letter. "This was sent to the foundation addressed to you," she said. Inside was a drawing pencil lines uneven but familiar. My mother's old garden, the one Veronica had torn apart, reimagined in full bloom. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, for Ms. Anderson, who taught us that creation is the best revenge. It was signed by one of the scholarship students. I folded the letter gently, tears warming the edge of my smile. When the speeches began, my father appeared at the back of the room. He didn't approach, didn't interrupt, just stood there, hands clasped, listening as the director spoke about legacy and renewal. Our eyes met once. There was no apology, no explanation, only a nod, a quiet acknowledgement that we had both survived the same storm and chosen different shores afterward. Later, after the crowd had gone, I stepped outside into the evening light. The air was heavy with jasmine, the same scent my mother used to love. Naomi joined me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," she said softly. "You turned the ending into something worth remembering." I looked at the gallery behind us, its windows glowing gold in the sunset. "It wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about taking back the truth." She smiled. "Same thing sometimes." That night, back in my apartment, I placed the student's drawing beside my mother's restored photo and my father's letter. 3 fragments of a life rebuilt from wreckage. I lit a candle not for mourning, but for gratitude. As the flame steadied, I whispered into the stillness, "You can rest now." Whether I meant my mother or myself, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. The window was open, and the sound of the city at night, the cars, the laughter, the soft rustle of wind, felt alive again. I thought about how far I'd come from that dinner table where laughter had once meant humiliation. Now it meant peace. Before turning in, I opened my journal and wrote a single line. They tried to erase me, but I remembered louder. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and let the quiet of my own making carry me into sleep.